The House just passed a bill that will raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour. Are you okay with this? Why or why not? It needs to be incrementally raised. Pennsylvania proposed a yearly incremental raise till it hit $15 to keep inflation from skyrocketing. Minimum wage should most definitely be raised, but I would say anywhere between $10.50 to $12.50 per hour. I lived okay on $11 per hour full-time. It wasn't anything fantastic, but I lived after budgeting correctly. Granted, that was 3 years ago, and it would all depend on where you live as well. The only reason it seems drastic is because our lawmakers have not seen fit to keep pace with inflation since the last increase. They should not be encouraged to drag their feet any longer. $15 an hour for a 40-hour week, and assuming you are paid for a 52-week year, comes to about $31,200 annually. HHS issues poverty guidelines for each household size. For example, the poverty level for a household of 4 is an annual income of $25,750. To get the poverty level for larger families, add $4,420 for each additional person in the household. So, at just over $31,000 a year, you're not all that far above the poverty level, and could be below it, depending upon the size of your family. And, as you said, there are parts of the country where you definitely would be. I make $13 per hour on a 40-plus hour workweek as a cook in NY. I make a little over $2,000 a month. After I blow $1,300 on rent, bills, and utilities, I have about $780 left for food, gas, and any other household amenities. If a problem crops up, I can always just slit my own throat. There are a lot of people who live on minimum wage in the US. While it definitely seems appealing at first, I wonder how bad the inflation would be. Getting food while in college is already expensive enough. From a self-interest standpoint, if you have student loans, you should want inflation. Even if it's bad for the economy as a whole, it would inflate away your student loans, which will have a much bigger impact on you than the worse economy. Did you live solely on minimum wage? Very yes. Wages have been lowering for decades because they haven't even been keeping up with inflation. This is not remotely radical, and if anything, I'm disappointed that it doesn't go far enough, because people seem to think it's some crazy thing and it'll cause pushback. It's just one piece of the solution. Raising the minimum wage doesn't do a whole lot for those in the middle class. This will only hurt the people it's trying to help. You can already see the effects of this with Taco Bell and McDonald's with their ordering kiosks. Things were going that way anyway, but this is helping to speed it up. Automated kiosks are a red herring. They were already on their way regardless of wages, because they are cheaper in the long run than paying someone even $5 per hour, not to mention taxes, benefits, insurance, etc. I won't say my opinion, but no way this bill becomes law. I agree. I am not educated enough on this type of thing. My only question is, couldn't this have an adverse effect on the job market? Most minimum wage jobs are entry-level, one would assume, thus pretty expendable. Is there anything from a business just firing a % of employees to offset the cost of paying out more? Or going full automation more rapidly to remove this cost? Thus resulting in fewer jobs for people who need to benefit from this wage increase? Again, have no idea how all this works in reality, just something that seemed to make sense. You're not educated on it, but your instincts are dead on. I live in LA and our minimum wage is well on its way to $15, started in 2016. We are currently at $14.25. So basically what is happening is that a lot of businesses simply fire some of their employees to keep costs down. The car wash near my work is a prime example, eliminating half of their workforce. Or maybe the business starts cutting hours of everybody to save the increased cost from somewhere else. So even the other employees are carrying some of the burden. Another thing to watch is how costs simply go up because of it. It now costs business $X more to do what they were doing yesterday, so they raise costs to the consumer. You know, the people needing extra money in minimum wage. Except that not all workers are minimum wage. So now I have to try to convince my boss to give me a raise after he just raised all the minimum people's pay rate. Sure, that'll happen. And my wife, who was making just over $15 before, which was okay because it was over minimum, but now it's only pennies over. Where's her increase? This is the stuff that happens when extreme changes are made like this. Minimum wage isn't bad, it's a good thing. But it isn't as simple as just raising it to fix the problem. That just raises the problems too. This is exactly what I commented on. Besides cutting their workforce and moving more towards automation, you'll probably see an increase in the prices you pay for goods and services. It might not be a huge increase, but you'll certainly notice that your spending dollar won't be going as far as it used to. Against Let's say I make $15 an hour right now. Basically double minimum wage right now. If the lowest tiered employee, that currently makes $7.25, is raised to $15, is my wage going to increase to $30? Do you not see how this can get expensive for small businesses and corporations alike? They just raised minimum wage to $15 at my job in Washington, and I was making $15 already after working there for 3 years and at Cook's wages. They gave us a small percentage raise, so I make like $15.65 and new dishwashers make almost as much as I do. It kind of blows, but they're working at slowly adjusting everyone's wages accordingly. Also, these new hires are making more than some of the CNAs and RNs right now. I work at a hospital. Exactly. You are now making minimum wage. 100% against it. Unfortunately, that does not solve the root of the problem, but politicians like to leverage simple fixes like this to boost their standing. Do I know what will fix the problem? Of course not, but I do know raising the wage floor creates a skilled, non-skilled worker gap. Imagine a business is willing to pay $10 per hour for their base employee and $15 per hour for their skilled worker because that's what they can afford. Now they have to pay everyone the same rate. Assuming product prices remain the same, this means less employees that have to work harder. Naturally, they are going to keep the skilled workers, but what is the incentive of all skill when base pay is the same? Turnover happens and you have lower skilled workers. They will have to pay the skilled worker $20 if they want to keep them. See how that works? It depends. Is the price of goods and services going to remain the same? What happens when the price of goods adjusts to match the new wages? Won't this cause inflation? What happens to people who are already making $15 an hour? Do they get a raise too, or do they now make the bare minimum? Will businesses be forced to lay people off after they can no longer afford to pay them? Also, doesn't the cost of living differ from state to state, region to region? Isn't the minimum wage already about $15 in some states? How does this affect them? In areas where the cost of living is currently low, would this have the potential of driving cost up? I feel like there's a lot of things to consider. It's about time, really. Because, while it is in the face of automation, it is encouraging for young people or even students to make a lot more than before. I live around places where I could get a job and the minimum pay they'll give is $7.25 an hour. It's unsustainable and it needed to be increased. I mean, who wouldn't be okay with this? People who understand basic economics. I'm interested to see its effects. In theory, it may not be the best decision. It's a very large increase to make overnight. Here in the UK, the minimum wage has doubled since 2000, but it's been a very slow process, so we've seen little to no effect on unemployment. Basically, doubling the minimum wage overnight in some places could potentially and would likely result in unemployment, lowered job creation rates, and some higher prices of goods. There's a good chance we might actually see a minimum wage increase have the effects it does in theory. Don't see it being great for small businesses especially. Our federal minimum wage has went up like $2 since year 2000. Hell, my state wage is only slightly above $5. I'm not saying we should jump to 15, but we are due for a change, that's for sure. Also, a federal minimum wage makes no sense. $15 per hour in rural MS isn't equivalent to $15 per hour in NYC. They need to pass a bill that prevents the cost of living from being more than most people can afford. That would essentially fix the problem. What you're describing is price fixing, and it is probably the worst solution. It's literally a pathway to hyperinflation and people eating their pets. It's almost like government interference with the economy only fucks things up. Maybe they shouldn't really be involved in the first place? It's not gonna go through the Senate, so it doesn't matter. Don't give one mate, not my country. Even in areas where the labor market is tight, the wages for unskilled work are between $12 and $15. Small businesses that pay minimum wages operate on small margins, and a $15 minimum wage could torpedo many small businesses. While I have no horse in this race, I worked at a bushel of low-wage jobs in my youth, and I was glad to have the money because it was better than nothing. Absolutely not. The economy would completely crash instantly. Any businesses that somehow survive will start cutting hours and employees to make up for the drastic losses, meaning the homeless population will increase as well and keeping only the largest corporations alive. This isn't even mentioning the cost of living, which will likely shoot up as well. It's essentially devaluing the dollar even further. You'd have to show me plenty of proof that this is a good idea before I even slightly reconsider. If it were to be signed into law, which I doubt, I think the main effect will be to lower employment opportunities for the unskilled and marginally employable. With the economy doing well and unemployment at record lows, it should be relatively easy for someone with marketable skills who feels they're underpaid to find a more lucrative job. If employers are legally required to pay someone more than the employer feels the employee is worth, it's likely that the position will be cut. Doesn't matter since the Senate won't even vote on it. But at election time, the Democrats can say, "See, we're the good guys. They voted against your raise." No, not really a good idea. Those making $9 right now would get a 66% raise by default, which would imply that if you were already making $15 you would also get a 66% raise by default. This would immediately destroy small businesses. It would also make those companies who didn't fail right away cut way down on labor costs to continue to make ends meet. Since labor costs will skyrocket, companies will have to seek out cheaper products and labor. They will also have to raise prices, which people tend to stop purchasing items when the prices go up. Netflix? And that was just a couple of bucks. Jobs will be outsourced and there will be major layoffs. People may be making more on the hour, but they will be earning about the same. Meanwhile, other prices will go up to offset the new labor costs, and then we're back to people not being able to afford basic necessities and needing to make more money. A lot of people suggested a steady increase as it coincides with inflation. That is the correct way. The $1 menu would become the $5 menu. Some business owners would either close down or cut back so much that their products would not be the same quality. Fuggin' Democrats. I believe the free market should determine wages. In my hometown of San Francisco, California, $15 hour has already been mandated. That's $2,400 per month, gross. Studio apartments rent for average $2,000 to $3,000, mo. Third grade math illustrates how that works out. The value of the dollar will drop. So everything I have saved in the bank is worth less. Then how does that affect trade? All our products go up in price, other countries aren't getting a raise. They already don't buy our shit and we don't make anything in America as it BC foreign labor is much cheaper. People keep saying everyone will get a raise, which simply isn't true. Some people might. I guess I'm torn to be honest. The real issue is that there aren't enough jobs that pay a living wage, so people take minimum wage jobs, jobs that are in reality designed to ease young and/or unskilled workers into the workforce, as their primary means for surviving. Moving forward, it's going to be harder and harder for young people to find legitimate work unless a new sort of government-sponsored program gets set up that will train young people basic skills and pay them a wage under the minimum, which might cause some legal issues. And considering how much people hate social programs like that, I can't really see it happening anytime soon. The sad part though is we're probably going to see a decrease in jobs. At least in the immediate future. You nearly double the cost of the labor for a fast food place or a grocery store, and those places are going to have to cut their workforce in order to remain profitable. And this in turn will almost certainly push the ever-growing automation field. There's a lot to think about beyond more money for workers is good. Although I'm definitely in that boat, I also understand that there's a lot more to the picture that most people aren't thinking about. The people who want this just see it as more money without any care for the adverse effects doubling the minimum wage can have, like job loss, inflation, etc. Get ready for half of those jobs to become automated.